So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, where we will be discussing expanding access to and funding for the state rental assistance program. So this webinar is being hosted by our team here at the Partnership for Strong Communities. My name is DiLella. I am the Advocacy and Education Manager with PSC, and PSC is dedicated to ensuring that everyone in Connecticut has a safe, stable home that is affordable to them in an equitable community of their choice. We lead advocacy, advance original research, and bring together the coalitions needed to drive systemic change towards our shared vision. So our goal for today is to provide an overview of the state's rental assistance program, or you may hear referred to as RAP. We're going to talk about the deep positive impact housing subsidies have on families, housing stability, and their quality of life, and the opportunity to expand RAP to serve more households in the state. I want to quickly make clear before we get started that DOH's RAP, the Department of Housing, DOH's RAP program, their wait list is currently closed. We will drop a link in the chat for folks if you would like to sign up to be notified when the program's wait list is open again. But we just wanted to make folks aware of that at the outset. We will begin today's conversation by setting the stage for the need of the program with our Interim Executive Director, Chelsea Ross. And then I will hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. From there, we'll open it up to audience Q&A, as I mentioned before. And from there, we'll close out the hour with information on how you can engage and continue to support the expansion of RAP within your lives and networks. So with that, I will pass it over to PSC's Interim Executive Director, Chelsea Ross, to get us started.
All right, thanks, Danielle. Can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me before I start talking? Great, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to set the stage a bit before handing it off to our experts today. PSC is on a mission to promote equitable change in Connecticut housing policy. We believe that housing is a human right. Hundreds of thousands of people in Connecticut are experiencing significant housing instability, uncertainty, and crises, particularly and disproportionately those with low and extremely low incomes, and disproportionately Connecticut's Black and Brown households. At PSC, we work on policies that impact families at all points across Connecticut's housing stability continuum that you're looking at right now. Over on the left, from unhoused folks, those that are unsheltered, sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation, or those staying in emergency accommodations, including homeless shelters and domestic violence shelters, to families that are in temporary accommodations, including no-cost or low-cost places like motels, hotels, those in doubled up or overcrowded housing, those experiencing frequent or forced moves, to families moving to the center of this graphic, to families living in time-limited housing, such as halfway, sober, or respite housing, those receiving short-term rental assistance or eviction prevention assistance, to those living in non-time-limited housing, but still paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs, or living in unsafe or unhealthy housing or in economically distressed neighborhoods, with the ultimate goal of stability all the way over there on the right, where families live in non-time limited housing and pay less than 30% of their income on housing costs and are living in safe, healthy housing in thriving neighborhoods, be it owning their own home, renting their home with or without the support of a subsidy program, like through the rental assistance program folks will discuss today. So Connecticut has an affordable housing crisis for which the lowest income families in our state are paying the price. For every 100 extremely low income households in Connecticut, there are only 42 rental units available and affordable to them. And more than a quarter of Connecticut families who rent their home are extremely housing cost burden, meaning they're forced to spend more than 50% of their income on rent. And 56% of Black renters in Connecticut are housing cost burden, while making up only 12% of the state's population. So make no mistake, housing justice is racial justice. So, solving our state's affordable housing crisis requires a compendium of policies that support the creation and preservation of affordable housing in all communities across the state, those that support equitable access and protections for families, and those that create affordability, like the rental assistance program. I just want to note in December, Partnership for Strong Communities hosted a comprehensive forum discussing, the different kinds of housing subsidy programs that exist at both the state and federal level. Today, we're focusing specifically on RAP, as it's the state-funded tenant-based housing voucher program. And unlike the federal Section 8 program, our state leaders have the power to set the funding levels and ultimately determine how many families can be stabilized by the program. So as Danielle said, you'll learn more about RAP from the experts. Hopefully you'll ask some questions and you'll leave understanding the benefits and importance of RAP as a critical ingredient to making sure that everyone in Connecticut has a safe, stable home that's affordable to them in an equitable community of their choice. So I think with that, we'll spend the rest of our time hearing from our experts on the panel. I'll turn it back over to you, Danielle.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. So I'm going to ask that each of our panelists just take a quick moment, a minute or so to introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself, and please tell me one thing that brings you joy in life, and then we will dive in. I want to kick it off to Steve DiLella to start the conversation, and I'll pass it off from there.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Chelsea. My name is Steve DiLella. I'm the director of the Individual and Family Support Program Unit at the Connecticut Department of Housing. And we at DOH, we oversee the RAP program. That's why I'm here today. But we also set policy and oversee the homeless response system, from entry to the system to homeless outreach all the way to permanent supportive housing at the end. And we also manage the Section 8 program as well under my unit. One thing that brings me joy, watching my kids play sports.
Thank you, Steve. All right, I'm going to pass it over to William Johnson Jr.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So my name is William Johnson Jr. Company is Diversified Management Solutions. We are a small Meriden-based landlord. As of today, we own 100 residential units in the Meriden area. I'm happy to be here, happy to be a landlord. I was Meriden born and raised. And for the last 10 years, I've been giving back to my hometown, providing decent, safe, sanitary housing for folks that choose to live in that community. One of my joys in life, my 3 dogs.
So I'm also a dog person, but I'm also a cat person, so I can play both sides of the card there. Get off to Tina Robinson. Introduce yourself and share us one thing that brings you joy.
Hi, I'm Tina Robinson, and I have been on RAP for many of years. And what brings me joy is because of that, I am able to be a full-time mom to my 2 grandchildren again.
Thank you for sharing. All right, I want to kick it back to Steve. I just want to set the stage a little bit with more information about the rental assistance program, particularly for Connecticut. Are you able to talk about who the program serves?
Sure. So I can give a little brief overview. Obviously, the state rental assistance program is not quite as old as the Section 8 program, but I think back in the day when policymakers decided that they needed to add additional funds for rental assistance in the state, the legislators and the governors at the time decided that they would put funding in. So basically, when these programs were created, or when RAP was created, it basically followed many of the same rules and regulations as Section 8. There are a couple minor differences. For example, non-disabled individuals in our program pay 40% of their income toward the rent instead of 30%. Elderly or disabled in RAP still pay the 30%, which kind of lines up with Section 8. But on the other side, we also have more flexibility with RAP in terms of some of the requirements. So sometimes that does have makes it a little bit easier for us to utilize those vouchers. One of the things we also do is we have a little more flexibility on the amount of rent that we pay. So with the Section 8 program, we follow the federal fair market rent. But for RAP, we create our own FMR, which we call the maximal allowable rent, MAR. And because of we are on the ground local, we're a little bit quicker to be able to adjust to the changes in the market. And we're also able to look at suburban communities in a different light. So that makes it a little more access to those communities a little bit easier. Now, in terms of the overall program, it has been growing over the past decade or so. We are up to around 6,800 people who are on the RAP program. But and a little difference from the Section 8 program, the RAP program has become more highly specialized over the course of time. When the program was first begun back in, I think, the 90s, it was way before my time. So either late 80s, early 90s. It really did mirror Section 8, but as time has gone on, legislators and policymakers have really tried to focus it on specific target populations, whether that is the homeless, whether that is individuals leaving an institution such as a nursing home, or for funds for Department of Children and Families, or housing resources for the Department of Developmental Services. We've really seen more of a specialization that has worked between state partners with DOH, with some of our sister state agencies like DSS, DCF, DDS, and DMIS, to really expand access for some of the most highly vulnerable citizens in the state of Connecticut to provide that stable housing. And one thing that I've certainly learned over the course of time with DOH is providing stable housing leads to positive outcomes for the individuals in our program, for the other state agencies that we partner with. So when we provide that base of stable housing, somebody has the opportunity to have a place to call home, have a place to lay their head at night, so they don't have to worry about some of those issues, so they can focus more on their mental health or their substance abuse if we're partnering with DMIS, more on their family situation if we're partnering with DCF, or more on just their physical health care if we're partnering with the Department of Social Services. So really that base is really super important to having success with some of the other issues that they are working on in their lives. And because of this, we've certainly noticed great outcomes. You know, most of the people that we house in RAP stay permanently housed for a minimum of a year, and many participants are on for 5, 10, 15 years. So we know that it really can have positive impacts on the lives of the people that receive the rent subsidy. Now, there are some negatives to the program, and I think that has kind of been mentioned earlier. That is, the supply does not meet the demand. Clearly, we are seeing a heightened demand for rent assistance. It's always been that way. However, the pandemic has made that a little bit more difficult, as well as inflation. As more things get expensive, it becomes harder and harder to pay the rents. So we are starting to see more people entering housing crisis. More people entering housing instability, and we are trying to mitigate that. So I think that's what part of this conversation is about, is how the RAP program really does assist in stabilizing households and getting rid of that housing instability. Also, because of that supply and demand issue, we haven't opened up our waiting list for quite some time. And in fact, we still have people on our waiting list from the second to last time we opened it, which was about 15 years ago. So that is quite difficult for us to manage, knowing that we have had people on the list for that long. But we do try our best to move folks along as quickly as we can. But we know that, once again, there are just unfortunately too many people that are in need of housing assistance, and our funds can't quite meet that demand.
Thank you, Steve. And I know I mentioned we'll talk a little bit at the end about opportunities for advocacy, to your point around the need for the program and the increased engagement with the program, and folks needing more support as life gets harder and expenses get more grow with inflation in the economy. All right, I want to open up this question to all three of our panelists, but I'll start by just asking, what has been a benefit of the rental assistance program in your life? I know for William, I think in you and your tenants experience, and Steve, for you within the program's experience, and Tina, for you with your experience as a voucher holder. So I don't know who wants to dive in first, but I turn that question over to all three of you.
I'll dive in. It's been a huge benefit in our life. I really don't know where me and my grandkids would be at this point if I didn't have the help of RAP. It has supplied us and helped us with stable housing, a very good area, and they are very happy. We've been through a lot, and you know, their biological mom just passed right after the opening of the pandemic. But we were able to get through this. My grandson, he was born at 1 pound, 3 ounces. So we are back and forth to the doctors. It's making me more open and to be available to do what I have to do on a medical standpoint, and a living standpoint for my grandchildren. It's really helped tremendously.
Yeah, from my experience, I think stories like what Tina is explaining really are at the heart of this program. Like I mentioned earlier, it really does provide that level of stable housing, and we've seen, no kidding, thousands of people who were formerly homeless being able to gain access to permanent housing. So I think that is just a testament to what this program can do. On the other side too, maybe not as touchy-feely, but there is cost savings to the state as well. And so not only does RAP provide rent assistance and is the right thing to do, because clearly providing permanent housing is the right thing to do on a policy side. However, when we are taking folks who are living in an institution like a nursing home and moving them out into the community, or taking people who are under DCF care and moving them to the community, or putting people who are in the homeless service system moving in the community, permanent housing, even though it is expensive, and we all know how expensive rent is, it still is actually cheaper than providing care for individuals in an institutional setting. So not only is it the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do, because we do provide people with an opportunity to better their lives while at the same time doing things that is cost effective.
Steve?
The big takeaway for me is being able to help so many neighbors and our fellow people attain that decent, safe, sanitary housing. As I started with, I'm married and born and raised, and a lot of these folks that we take in through town have been habitually homeless. And having grown up in the community, I've seen them out there on the streets. I'll share this one story. There was a gentleman that I had known for years. He was always out looking for money. And I had a program that came to me. He's not through RAP, through another subsidized program. And he had come to the top of their list for a certificate, and it was time to house him. And I said, sure, I've got a place. And it was right before Christmas. And they had to go out and find this gentleman because he had been sleeping in the bushes. And they went to the bushes and found him and brought him down. And just really quick story. A few months prior, I'd been going through the center of Meriden. I had a bunch of stuff on my trailer, and I had lost part of the load. And without realizing it, I heard him yell from the side of the street. I immediately realized we lost something. I stopped. This gentleman didn't know me from a hole in the wall, and he came hustling out and helped me load the stuff back on the trailer. I said, thanks, and we parted ways. And here it was about 6 weeks later, he shows up on my doorstep out of the bushes, and he got picked for a housing certificate. So these are our neighbors. These are our friends. They're other human beings, and it's just so rewarding to be able to get them out of this repetitious homelessness. I've got another gentleman in another program. I had purchased a property. He was residing there. He ended up incarcerated. When he came out, we had another unit for him. Unfortunately, he was incarcerated, lost that one. He's on a wait list now for a third unit. He said, "You'd rent to me again?" I said, "Sure. I know you, you know me. We've got a really good thing worked out. And one thing about all my tenants, they know I like to help people. So it's very rewarding to be able to help our friends and neighbors.
Awesome. Thank you all. It just speaks to, as Steve said, just the human need, but also the financial benefits. There's sort of a wealth of positivity that comes along with this program and its availability to folks in the state. I do want to take a bit of a detour and spend some time talking with each of you, or hearing from each of you about what you see as the limitations of the program. Where has it been challenging for you? Where do you see that maybe there's room for improvement? What things feel like they might be limiting in this program from your perspective?
I'll start off. Honestly, the only downside is there isn't enough subsidy out there, right? Whether it's RAP, temporary RAP, the TRAP programs, there's just not enough. There is such a demand for every unit that comes available. I've got 5 or 6 people that are willing and able to jump in there. I had run into a family this week that was being evicted from a house down the road. They saw that I recently bought one of the neighboring properties, and we're in the process of renovating it. They couldn't wait to get in to take a look at it, and they're struggling. She's working, her husband's disabled. And it's just so, it's so sad to hear their stories, but it's also very heartwarming to bring them in and allow them to call this place their home. As far as the process, it's very streamlined. It's a very friendly process. The annual inspections are terrific. It makes sure that all landlords hold their property to a standard. We try and go above and beyond, and for that, I get a tremendous amount of referrals from my current tenants. I've got a great working relationship with a lot of the wrap providers in the area, but my only challenge is that there's not enough out there, and there's just so many people that are barely scraping by.
I totally agree with you, William, 100%. Not enough units or funding available for units. I really appreciate everything you say as a landlord. I'll go into some of the things I've heard on the other side. So there is bureaucracy with RAP, but I think there will be with any government program. We do try to streamline as much as possible, but there are instances where it does take time to get inspectors out. It does take time to get the paperwork completed. So in a perfect world, can we move somebody from into a unit within a week? Yes, that would be great. But we know, unfortunately, we can't move always that quickly. So sometimes it does take some time. So we're always willing to look at ways to improve our system to make it even quicker. But I think there certainly are some things that we can improve with the program, knowing that the overall impact is great. But sometimes we have the hurdles of our own bureaucracy that sometimes we create, but that we need to overcome.
If you don't mind me hopping back in for just a minute, just to piggyback on what you said, thank you. As far as the inspections, I found that they were scheduled fairly timely. They're always professional, and again, it's just making sure that there's a standard for every action. There's a reaction. There's a reason that we have to have annual inspections. It's to keep everybody honest and keep everybody moving. And every landlord that gets into this knows that there is going to be a slight delay in payments. That's the nature of doing this business. You may be on hold, whether it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I did a mid-February move-in. There's a gentleman transitioning out of a skilled nursing facility. We caught up with payments this month because by the time he moved in and everything was signed, it was the end of February. March payments were already in process. But you go into that knowing that, and the windfalls at the end. This is not, sorry about that. This is not a new concept that all landlords know going into this. Checks go out once a month, and it's usually right around the 20th. You got to be cut off. So make sure your stuff's in, or it's going to be on hold. And aside from that, I find it a very friendly program and very easy to work with. So thank you for all you do.
Hi.
Jump in, Tina.
Hello. Hi. I just, I totally am 100% on board with what they both had said. For me, I never had any issues as long as you do your due diligence, do your paperwork, get it in on time. For me, I'm probably the most youngest old-fashioned person you would ever want to meet. I personally bring my paperwork up to the office and drop it off. That way there's nothing missed, nothing getting lost. And as long as, the landlord is on ball with, their part, and you should be good. I would have to say I lived in a unit a while back, and it wasn't that great of an area. And I had big time problems with the people that had lived upstairs from me, and I wanted out. And I went to my worker, and she was like, as long as, I was like, can I break the lease? She's like, as long as your landlord is on ball and you get a letter from the landlord stating that it's okay to move, and you give your 30 days notice, then it'll be okay. And I did that. And thankfully the landlord did that for me also. So I never had any issues or any problems. It's been good.
I'm really glad to hear that. So you may not, Tina, have an answer to this, but I would still love to hear if you have thoughts on this. But I wanted to open it up to each of you, since you have different perspectives on the program. and different experiences within it and utilizing it, what is one suggestion you have to help improve the program?
I really don't have any because I didn't have any issues. I would say as long as you as a renter and the landlord do it, you know, have to do, and you comply, you're good.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with Tina from the landlord side of it. I don't have any changes to suggest or any issues with the program. Again, very seamless, very friendly for everybody. You just got to make sure you follow the rules and understand what you're walking into. And
Right.
it's terrific. It's a terrific program for everybody. It allows the tenants to, you know, remain in place and not have this transitional where you're picking up, whether it's, you know, your family or just a couple. Moving's very stressful. I don't, Tina, I don't ever want to move again. I don't know about you. Moving can be stressful, and once folks are settled in place, it's disruptive to ask them to pick their whole life up and move from one place to another because you had a time limit. So I've got no suggestions on how to make the program better. Very easy. The folks that administer are doing a fantastic job. It's communication, making sure that paperwork's done on time and everything flows.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. If you know what the requirements are, it can be a more effective and effective program. And I think that's where we try, once again, to streamline as much as possible. Any way we can be better. I know we've began offering direct deposits for landlords so that they can get their payments even quicker instead of waiting for the mail. So we're always open to suggestions on how to overall manage the program a little bit better to get things going even a little bit quicker. Even a couple days matters.
Patience and communication and understanding.
Yeah, very human values and grounding in just being human. And to, each of you sort of spoke to, right? Like, the desire to move is not strong. The ability to have a place where you're safe and comfortable and stable in is so important. We at the partnership and many of our partners look through a housing first lens, which essentially just means that nothing comes, or housing should come first and everything should come after. But having that safe place to be is so critical to our success and to our just well-being as humans. So I appreciate you all sharing that. I did also hear from all of you that the program would benefit from more funding. I did just want to quickly turn to Steve and pose the question, how many vouchers do we need in Connecticut? And what would it cost to meet that need? You have an answer to that?
I can answer the cost part of it. I'll leave the number of units that we need to more of our partners who look in depth on that. I know you have done a lot of work at the partnership trying to figure out how many people are spending more than a certain percentage of their income toward the housing. So I may not be the expert at that, but I can tell you certainly how much it costs. And I think it depends on the household type. And obviously it depends on where you live, because Lower Fairfield County is a lot more expensive than northeastern part of Connecticut. But overall, when we look at our programs, we do have a lot of programs that are for individuals only. Our referrals are for 1 bedrooms or efficiencies or along those lines. And the average there is probably about a little bit shy of $900 a month. So what's that? A little over $10,000 a year. Families obviously have bigger units, so they're going to be more expensive. So they average around $13,000 a year. So if you kind of come up with your numbers, I think you can be able to do a nice extrapolation of what the total cost would be there.
Thanks, Steve. All right. Well, we're a little bit earlier than I thought we would be, but I do want to open it up. I see some questions coming in from the audience. If you have questions that haven't been answered yet, or you want to join into the conversation, please take a moment to jump into the Q&A box to submit a question. But I want to kick it off to the first question I see here, which was just an ask to repeat how many people, Steve, you had mentioned were currently on the WRAP program. And if you are able to share how many folks are currently on the wait list.
Sure. If you give me 1 second, I can give you the exact number as of the end of March. You know, generally we're on the 67 to 6,800 number. Our wait list is between 2,500 and 2,700 currently.
Thank you. And folks, there was also a question, the individual said, I'm curious about average subsidy amounts and how the program is funded. Are you able to speak a little bit to how the program is funded?
Yeah, the program is funded totally by the legislature and the governor through the general fund. So right now through the budget process where there's negotiations between the two parties or the two institutions, they're the ones who decide how much money and they agree how much and for if any particular subpopulation or just for the general RAP program, they give us that funding.
Awesome. And as we mentioned before, there is the Section 8 program. Just to provide clarity, the Section 8 program is the federal program, so they receive funds from the federal government that come through the state. Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Yes, and that is correct. That is correct. And with the federal program, we do get money directly from HUD, which is great, and we appreciate every little bit that we get. And we approximately between the different HUD programs, you have Section 8, but there are some subsidiary programs with that, like the emergency housing vouchers, which are relatively new for homeless population, mainstream vouchers for individuals with disability, and VASH vouchers for homeless veterans. We are approaching nearly 8,000 units of those as well, or 8,000 vouchers.
I had a particular question come in for William, asking for you to provide some more information about DMS. Are you able to speak to that a little bit more?
As to
The question just says DMS. I don't know if the individual who asked it wants to clarify. I assume it was something you referenced before in your comments. DMS.
DMS is the initials that we use to abbreviate our business, Diversified Management Solutions. Just very generally, we are a small Meriden-based company with, as of today, 100 residential units in the community.
Thank you. All right, I'm jumping through some of these other questions. I had an individual ask, as a funder, how could the rental assistance program, they're particularly asking for Hartford's region, but I'll open it up to statewide conversation. How can funders better support RAP?
By funders, who do we mean? Because there's just the one funding source for RAP, and that is just, you know, the
Steve, it's Sean.
Okay, thank you.
The commenters with a private or community foundation. So I think we're talking about private philanthropy.
So how can philanthropy help fund RAP? Or what can philanthropy do to increase RAP certificates?
How about what can philanthropy do to support RAP, either expansion or success of voucher holders and improving housing security?
I think there's a couple different ways. Clearly, one of them is obviously what you're doing today, increasing and spreading the message and using philanthropy dollars to do events such as this. Clearly, you can also use philanthropy to kind of what I said earlier, which is to kind of demonstrate what the need is and what the effects are. Philanthropy can also do evaluations and studies to show the benefits versus the costs of the program. So I think, you know, that just gives a powerful advocacy message. On the other side, philanthropy has in the past sort of seeded programs, you know, pilot programs to look at, you know, how we match the rent assistance with some social services to increase outcomes. So I know philanthropy was integral in the creation of the permanent supportive housing model. I know they've also tried some other models as well with our Department of Children and Families and such. So if there are other populations that is thought that providing a rental assistance would be beneficial to, philanthropy can help demonstrate the effects of that. I know one of the newest programs we've done is collaborated with our Head Start partners and finding families that are with a child enrolled in Head Start and early Head Start who are housing unstable. Clearly, we believe that the long-term impacts on the children are going to be wonderful because they'll have that stable place to live. They'll be able to get the education, not move, and all that stuff. So I think over the course of time, there will be some great outcomes. So philanthropy can help on, just showing us how successful it has been.
Thank you, Steve. All right, there's a question I see here that asks, how does the program reach the individuals that are on the list once a voucher becomes open and they are next? And I don't know, I'd love to open it up to all of our panelists. I see Tina, if you want to jump in and share your experience.
I mean, there's so many people that got to be served and need help. And when I applied when I believe I was about like 22 years old. They had a place out here in Meriden that was doing applications for RAP and Section 8. But then right after that, everything was put on a freeze. Everything was shut down. So they weren't actually taking in those applications right away. So it took me 9 years. But with that being said, you got to do your due diligence. And if you move, you make sure you write, you can call anybody to see who you need to write to send your new address. I know back then we had to make sure that they had our address, our current address, because then you receive a letter in the mail. That's how they notified me.
Yep, that's correct. Usually we'll reach out by mail. I think also we may have other ways of contacting, whether it's phone. But as soon as that opening is, as soon as we send out the list or the offer to the next person on the waiting list, it is done through mail. So you will get that. So Tina, you are 100% correct. Keep our administrator, John DeMillion Associates, and your worker updated on that so they're able to get in touch with you as quickly as possible. And once that happens, there is a process. You still have to make sure you're eligible for the program because Tina, you were on the wait list for 9 years. So things can obviously change with individuals in 9 years. Yeah.
It was a huge freeze. I don't know what was going on with the economy or whatever, but I know that you guys can only do what you can do with the funds that you get. So
so then once you get that letter that says that you are being offered a spot, you'll have to just go through that recertification process again to ensure that you're eligible for the program, because maybe you've increased income over the course of time and you're no longer eligible, which would actually be a great outcome. Or if you just if you're still within the program rules and guidance, then you just you get recertified. You say yes, you're eligible to go find a unit. Then it's on to apartment hunting time. So you kind of go and find the unit, and then once you find one, then that's when you come back to your worker and JDA and get that unit inspected and have those conversations with the landlords and formalize the deal.
The best day of my life. I thank the Lord.
Thank you both. I did just want to piggyback off of that because I see another question in the chat about the waiting list. Folks there was a particular question asking if the waiting list is back open, which at this particular moment, no, it is not. But they also asked if it was scheduled to reopen anytime in the near future. I didn't know if you could just speak to that process at all.
What we're trying to do right now is our Section 8 waiting list is a little bit on the lower side. So we're trying to figure out a way if we can actually merge the two, because like I've said, we've had some of our RAP participants on this wait list for so long. Tina, your 9 years is unfortunately not that uncommon. So if we're able to kind of meld those lists, we might be able to get through some of the RAP people a little bit quicker by actually offering them a Section 8. So we're in the process of requesting that change from HUD. And if that happens, we might be able to get through our RAP list a little bit quicker. And then we would anticipate opening up the overall wait list for both programs maybe within a year or so.
That's good.
If we don't get approval, the RAP wait list will probably stay where it is, and then we'd open up Section 8 only.
And I just realized I was muted, so sorry about that. Awesome. I want to jump over to William to bring you back into the conversation. I don't know if you can speak to this directly, but if you can, I'd love to hear your take on it. There was a question about if a family or an individual presents with an eviction on their record, do you still accept them? Is that an experience you've navigated?
Yes, so short answer, yes. And no, it's going to depend, not so much on the time, but on the circumstances. Right, you could be evicted for a number of things. There's non-payment, there's serious nuisance, there's violation of lease. Again, it will depend on circumstances. I've had them before where it's a family that fell behind and they were asked to leave because there were some other offline issues with the landlord, and they just used the non-payment of rent because that's the easiest vehicle to move somebody forward and take off, and get them to vacate, or lapse of time. If the lease was up and the landlord chose not to renew and they wanted the family to move on, and they brought an eviction for lapse of time just because it was up, certainly we could look at it and would consider admitting them. If it was for a violent crime, probably not someone that we'd want to introduce into one of our communities, but at the same point, they may lose their certificate for that. But short answer, just having an eviction, is that going to disqualify you from renting from me? Absolutely not. I'm a firm believer in second chances and third chances, right? And if DOH has allowed the family to maintain the voucher, there's a reasonably high suspicion that we would admit them. Things happen to every one of us. We're all human.
Thank you, William. It's part of why we were excited to bring you into this conversation, because of your willingness to, provide for your community and take care of folks in your neighborhood. But we do know, and just to reiterate, I know that is an ongoing problem, and there's a limited availability of places for folks to go to, particularly that limitation is stronger if you have an eviction on your record, and it's been something we've heard before. So grateful to hear that your group does provide space for folks, even who may have an eviction record part of their history. But yeah.
I was speaking very generally about whether or not I can tell you that in the 10 years we've been doing business, I haven't denied anyone with an eviction. It was never that serious where it was enough to keep them out and turn them away. That's not what we do. I'm in this business to help people. That's what we do. And that's part of the program: decent, safe, sanitary housing.
Thank you. All right, there are a lot of questions coming through, and I know we're getting close to the 15-minute mark of our hour here, or last 15 minutes of our hour here. So let me just quickly scroll through and make sure we can get to some more questions. So we just had a question come in. Somebody asks, how do you hold a housing authority accountable for maintaining their properties? Steve, I don't know if you want to tackle this. What the
yeah, obviously housing authorities do not participate in the RAP program because it is state funded. We do have some housing authorities that do some of the paperwork for us. But if you're talking specifically about housing authority properties and holding them accountable, that's more of a conversation for HUD. Because HUD is the one that funds those projects. I know over the course of time, there are some state-sponsored housing authority properties that DOH has invested pretty significantly into to improve those properties. So I have a feeling those will not be the ones you'd be looking to hold responsible, because they've been upgraded in the past 10 years and are in pretty good shape. But otherwise, I think it really is a conversation with HUD.
Thank you for clarifying that. I do want to quickly jump back to, we were touching a little bit on the eviction conversation. And I did see a question here that I want to make sure we make some space to answer. The individual asked, do you have data on how many certificate holders lose their certificates involuntarily as a result of evictions or failure to recertify or other fault-based conduct?
We do have, we are able to run reports, but I do not have any of that information handy at this.
Awesome, thank you, that's fine. And if that individual wants to reach out later, we can always try and have that conversation offline. All right, I see a new question that just came in that I think would be helpful to discuss a little bit. The question is, how often, if ever, do you see it being an issue that a tenant or household member, like a young worker, get a raise in wages and then has to lose their housing voucher because they no longer qualify for income?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so they're asking about if a tenant or a household member gets a raise in their income, in their source of income, and then lose their housing voucher. How often is that something you see or the program sees happen? That change of impacts?
Yeah, so they basically get enough income that they kind of are no longer eligible for the program. So we consider that to be a very positive outcome, obviously a positive discharge in that case. What we do is we actually do keep the voucher open for a year. So they stay on the program for a year, even though the state is not contributing a dime to the rent, just in case something happens and they do lose some of that income, they're able to kind of come back into it. So we do provide at least a year of safety net for those households. Once again, I'd have to ask our administrator to see what the numbers are. I know it certainly has happened, but is it a high percentage? I would not say that it's a high percentage.
Thank you. There is another question here that asks, does the RAP program provide project-based assistance, or does it work as a just as a tenant-based voucher?
It does both. We do have the majority of the program is tenant-based. However, we do have some project-based units. We have our first sort of attempt into project-based was in the homeless world, where we did a joint partnership and a joint request for proposals with different state agencies, where the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority would provide the capital to build the building, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services would provide the support services for the individuals, and DOH, and at the time it was DSS, provided the rent subsidies to make it all work. We've also, through legislative proposals, do provide a level of operating support through RAP to some of our state-sponsored housing portfolio, which I just mentioned. Some of those projects that we did put some development funds into, when you make the units nicer, the rent's going to go up. So we were able to provide the rent subsidies, so those individuals that were in those units before they were rehabbed did not lose out on the ability to live in the new ones because the rent went up. So we kept that solid, and we also kept the vouchers in those projects to keep them sustainable for the course of time. So I would say probably about maybe 15% of our overall portfolio is project-based, but the vast majority, obviously 85%, is tenant-based.
And just to clarify, I should have mentioned this at the beginning for folks who aren't familiar with that terminology. Project-based assistance is that the RAP voucher is connected to a building, a project, a particular housing project, and the tenant-based voucher, as I understand it, is connected. That voucher stays with the voucher holder, so it is not connected to the building, it is connected to the tenant. Thank you. All right, there are still a lot of questions in here. I am going to take just one more because I've seen the question of allocation. I'll turn this over to Steve as our final question here, but there are a few questions about how vouchers are allocated from the state to different communities within the state, different cities, municipalities. Are you able to speak to that process of how it gets out from the state to communities?
Yeah, so it depends on sort of which silo they're coming from within the RAP program. So if we are talking about just the regular RAP program, we do when we put out the lottery for the wait list, eligible individuals and households are able to apply, and once they're picked to go on the wait list, once they come up, they get to choose wherever they want to live in the state of Connecticut. So even if they are currently in Hartford, but they want to move to Stamford, that's totally fine. So really that is up to individual choice for those households on the regular wait list. Same sort of thing when you're talking about money follows the person. If DSS identifies a household that is ready to exit a nursing home, the voucher will go with that household or that individual, and they'll be able to find where they want to live. Same sort of thing, individual choice. A homeless is a little bit different. Usually we get allocated like a specific amount of money. Say we got $1 million for 100 vouchers. What we would do at that case is DOH would look at our homeless numbers throughout the state through the work that we do with our coordinated access networks, and then kind of divide them proportionally. So for example, if the Hartford region had 25% of the homeless population, we would give them 25% of the vouchers. So that's really the only type of program that kind of works that way. And some other ones like the Department of Developmental Services, when they did it, it was all through a competitive procurement process where it was all project based. So whichever projects got funded on the capital side were the ones that also received the rent assistance.
Thank you. I did say that was the last question, but I do want to take that back because I want to turn it over to Tina one last time. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this question, so apologies for that, but I do want to hear from you if there are any other supports or resources or information that might be made available to help voucher holders or folks who may benefit from the program. I don't know if you have any thoughts on what might help support voucher holders or residents in engaging with this program at all.
Your worker.
Like a caseworker?
Straight to the worker, straight to your caseworker. You have any questions, straight to your caseworker and they'll explain it to you. Leave a message if they don't answer and they will get back to you. That's what I did.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Steve. I am going to call it there. I know there are still questions in the chat. I will make sure to take a look at those questions after we wrap up here. And if there's anything we can answer offline, we'll do so. I did see a few questions come up about the federal Section 8 program through HUD. And I will remind folks that we did host back in December an informational forum, our iForum series, a conversation particularly about the Section 8 program. So your questions may be answered through that if you're interested in checking that out. And yeah, so thank you all so much. I am going to share my screen just to wrap up our conversation here with you all. But as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we would end today's call talking about opportunities to engage and to engage your legislators and expand the program, its funding and its reach. So you've heard from Steve, you've heard from Tina, you've heard from William about how Connecticut needs to not only ensure more housing is being consistently developed, but also that while we support development efforts, we additionally need to expand funding for state rental assistance programs to ensure that more households have access to safe and stable housing. You heard about the benefits of the program as well as some of the limitations of the program and how each of our panelists thought it may be improved or expanded upon. So a little bit of background, we at the Partnership for Strong Communities support our collective impact campaign called Home Connecticut. And Partnership and Home Connecticut campaign have been advocating at the legislature and with the governor to expand the rental assistance program. Our goal for this year was to see an additional $72 million in both fiscal years 2024 and 2025, which is the next biennium budget. We were hoping to see that additional $72 million included for the next 2 years. Unfortunately, at this time, we have not seen the governor's budget or the appropriations budget reflect that increase in RAPs. But we do know that for every $1 million that the state invests in the rental assistance program, it provides housing security to approximately 70 Connecticut families. So the impact is really huge, and it's really a very quick opportunity to help stabilize folks' housing experience. This is not the last time we will be having this conversation with the legislature. It is not the first time we've had this conversation with the legislature. It is an ongoing conversation. We're always working to make sure that that program is funded to meet the need and that it's adequately funded given inflation and other sort of external factors around the program. So This is a conversation we'll be continuing to have with Home Connecticut partners. It's a conversation that the Partnership for Strong Communities will be continuing to have. And it's a conversation we hope you'll be bringing and feel comfortable bringing to your elected officials and your representatives. Talk about the need for it in your community. Even if you don't utilize the rental assistance program, I would imagine many of you are all aware about the increase in cost of living and the increase in rent across the state, particularly for our renters. So this program is something that benefits everybody, even if you yourself are not utilizing the program. It helps make it more affordable for everyone to be in the state. If you're not already plugged into our action alerts and advocacy updates, Partnership for Strong Communities, you can stay connected with us. There's a link on the screen here. I will drop it in the chat in a moment, but it is www.pschousing.org/stay-informed. And you can sign up there to make sure that any information we share out about opportunities to testify at the legislature, events that are going on in a community, whether it's yours or a neighboring community, will come through that. So that is one way that you can stay connected after you leave this call today. And we will help make sure that this conversation is ongoing. So thank you all for being here with us today. I do just want to note one last thing before we wrap up here. We are very excited to be hosting our 4th annual Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. That will be in November of this year. So we're halfway through this year somehow, or almost halfway through this year already somehow, and gearing up for our November conference. It's going to be a 2-day conference, November 13th and 14th, and we'll be hosting sessions relevant to affordable housing advocates for policymakers, developers, lenders, funders, housing authorities, and the public. So pretty much anybody who has a vested interest in helping support Connecticut's affordability in the housing space. This year, our plan is to feature sessions that spotlight strategies and solutions that establish housing as the key to thriving communities. And you can check out, it says here, our website, which we will be building out more in the coming months for the conference for more information and how to get involved and get engaged in that space as we work our way towards November. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and the questions you all brought, and to our panelists for taking the time to share their experiences and expertise in this space. We really appreciate you all coming to be a part of this conversation and this ongoing drumbeat around the need for the rental assistance program. If you have any remaining or lingering questions following today's webinar, you will see the lovely array of myself and my team members' faces that are all available to you. And so please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions, particularly myself. You can reach me at Danielle, as you see spelled on the screen, at pschousing.org. And I will help either answer your question or connect you to the right member of my team who can answer your question if I am not able to. But with that, we thank you so much for your time. And a quick round of applause, or a silent round of applause, for our panelists. Thank you for joining us. And we appreciate your time. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's great to see everyone.
Thanks for inviting me.